Jr. has to put it up for the buzzer. Banks it in! He banks in the
have a timeout. Decide not to use it. Curry way downtown. Bang! Bang! Oh, what a shot from...
What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Scotty Talks NBA. I'm your host, Scotty. You can find me on all social media platforms at Scotty Drowned. As you know, Scotty Talks NBA is brought to you by DSM Media. Be sure to check out DSM Media on Twitter at DSM_media. From there, you can click on the link tree. It'll take you to our TikTok, our Instagram, our YouTube page, our merch channel. Just be sure to check it all out and support DSM Media any way you can. We appreciate it all, nonetheless. I do want to shout out our sponsors here at DSM Media over at Gents Barber Lounge. If you do not know, you should know. DSM Media is brought to you by Gents Barber Lounge. Check out one of the two great locations in Fishtown and Old City and book your appointment today. Gents owns the craft and it shows, rated the #1 barbershop on Yelp in the Philadelphia area. Multiple award-winning barbers and being able to handle any style of cut, adult or kid. Let's just take a quick look at some of Gent's work here. Right, www.gentsbarberlounge.com. Be sure to book your appointment today. And of course, I want to shout out our other sponsors over at luxidenjewelers.com. That's just luxiden.com. They are a jewelry website. Use code DSM at checkout, and you're going to get 25% off and free shipping of any selection of jewelry of your choice. So be sure to check them out. Nonetheless, guys, now that we've gotten through all the house cleaning, all the housekeeping here, we have some content to get into today, of course. We're going to go through the usual Thursday night recap. We'll get into some of the action from last night. There was only 2 games, so not much to get into there. We'll move on to updated power rankings. Of course, I give you guys my updated top 10 power rankings each and every week. But then, of course, we're going to take a look at the playoff picture. I have it noted down here on the banner. Says peek at the playoff picture. Just going to take a look, see how far certain teams are back of the team ahead of them in the playoff picture, which teams are fighting for playoff spots here, because in reality, we're into the last week, basically, a little over a week of basketball in the regular season left. And so a lot of these games, it's going to be like a playoff type atmosphere, especially in the Western Conference. So I want to pinpoint some of those teams, take a look at the remaining schedules, and we'll kind of identify which teams we may or may not think are going to ultimately make the play-in tournament and make the playoffs. Of course, next week, we're going to tier these teams out. I'm going to give you my legitimate contenders, my pretenders that are going to make the playoffs, and then those kind of wild card teams that are going to get into the playoffs, because there's always 1 or 2 each and every season. So we'll get into that next season or next week, right before playoffs actually start. I'll also give out my playoff predictions, seeding, playoff matchup predictions. All of that stuff will be next week. But nonetheless, let's get to the action today. We'll, of course, finish up with best bets for the Friday night slate, as well as my Friday night picks for you guys. But nonetheless, let's take a look at this matchup between the Celtics and the Milwaukee Bucks. So we had the Celtics visiting the Milwaukee Bucks last night on Thursday night. This was a slaughter. The Boston Celtics absolutely slaughtered the Milwaukee Bucks in Milwaukee. You had Jason Tatum in this one with 40 points, 8 rebounds, 8 for 10 from the three-point line. You had Jaylen Brown with 30 points, 5 rebounds, 5 assists. He was 3 for 5 from the three-point line. So you had 70 points between your 2 dynamic wings there from Boston. You look at the Bucks; they were never in this game at all. If we're being completely honest, they were down 28 at half. The Celtics actually led by 49 points at one point. They ended up winning this one by 41, obviously. You look at the other side of the court, you had Giannis with 24 points, 7 rebounds. He was 11 for 27 from the field. And then Chris Middleton, 13 points, 5 rebounds, 4 assists. He was 5 for 13 from the field. Aside from those two, you didn't get really much. The only other Buck that scored into double digits was Bobby Portis. So overall, maybe you would consider this a throwout game for the Milwaukee Bucks. As I mentioned, Jason Tatum goes 8 for 10 from the three-point line. He scores 40 points. There's not going to be much you're going to be able to do about that on that said night. And then you just add in a Jaylen Brown that's going to give you 30 and hit 3 threes as well. So 11 threes, 70 points between two players. You might lose that game, right? Especially if Giannis is not playing at his top premium level, shooting only 11 for 27 from the floor, 0 for 5 from the three-point line. So he had nothing going there. This game was going nowhere fast for the Milwaukee Bucks, and it's interesting because I still have precursor. I still have the Milwaukee Bucks as my number one team in the NBA. They're still my championship favorite if they can stay healthy, if they can be healthy throughout the playoffs. But nonetheless, this was sort of a statement game by the Boston Celtics here. You have the Bucks who weren't really missing anybody in this game, and same with the Celtics. These teams were at full strength, and the Celtics clearly got the better of the Milwaukee Bucks. Have to wonder how that kind of plays out once you get to the playoffs and you look back at the way these teams matched up over the regular season. Does that give Boston a nod if they end up matching up with the Milwaukee Bucks at some point in the postseason? It's going to be interesting, but nonetheless, we don't need to spend too much time on the 41-point blowout. Next, we had the Pelicans visiting the Denver Nuggets. Precursor here, no Nikola Jokic in this game. So you had the Pelicans coming away with a 107-88 victory. You had Brandon Ingram with his, I believe, second or third career triple-double. 31 points, 11 rebounds, 10 assists. He was 13 for 22 from the field. CJ McCollum in this one, he was lights out from the three-point line, 6 for 8 from the three-point line with 23 points, 3 assists. Trey Murphy Jr., man, he's one of my favorite guys in the league right now. He's so efficient. He wasn't super efficient last night, but nonetheless got the job done for me as far as bet I laid on him to hit over 3 threes last night. So he went 3 for 10 from the three-point line. Like I said, not the most efficient night for him, but 15 points, 3 assists in total for Trey Murphy Jr. Then we have Jamal Murray. He was the main guy there for the Denver Nuggets last night with Nikola Jokic out. Jamal Murray with 21 points, 7 assists, 4 rebounds, 4 for 10 from the three-point line. Bruce Brown contributing off the bench, 19 points, 5 rebounds, 4 assists. He was 7 for 13 from the field. Bruce Brown's been a nice spark for the Denver Nuggets. Obviously wasn't enough to help out Jamal Murray, Michael Porter Jr. in this one. As I mentioned, no Nikola Jokic. Jamal Murray was the only Denver Nugget to hit any three-pointers in this game. The Denver Nuggets went 4 for 28 from the three-point line. Those 4 coming from Jamal Murray when he went 4 for 10 himself. You look on the other side, New Orleans was 13 for 27, so a little over 50, a little under 50%, excuse me. Nonetheless, that's a good shooting night from the three-point line for the Pelicans, but that's the clear difference in this game. When Jamal Murray is the only one that hits three-pointers in a game for you, and mind you, it's not over 10, it's not going to do you. It's not going to bode very well for you. So 4 for 10 from the three-point line for Jamal Murray, 4 for 28 from the three-point line for the Denver Nuggets. Nonetheless, big win for the Pelicans as they shoot up to the 7th spot in the Western Conference, given tiebreakers, all of that included. So they're in a good spot. They just got to continue to play good ball down the stretch because the Western Conference is airtight right now. But nonetheless, you had the Pelicans getting victory in Denver against the Nuggets, and then you had the Celtics getting a victory in Milwaukee against the Bucks. Both road teams get the win last night. That being said, it is time to get into power rankings. We didn't have much action last night. Usually, recapping Thursday night action tends to take a little bit longer than that, but not when you only have 2 games. So, nonetheless, easy slate last night to cover. Let's get into power rankings, guys. This is something I like to do every week. As you guys know, if you're new to the show, these are very fluid power rankings, mind you. Once we get to the playoffs are going to have their own separate power rankings because there's different factors that you factor in once you get to the playoffs, right? Experience, not only how the team is playing currently, but how healthy are they? Experience in the playoffs, experience in the postseason. So all of those things get factored in. These power rankings could look very different once we get to next week. Once we get to the postseason, I should say. Nonetheless, let's get started here. I added a new feature, a little bit of a different add in here with the honorable mentions. Just wanted to give some teams credit. I didn't want some fan bases to feel left out. 10 is a tight number when you're talking about 30 total teams. So we got the top 10 here, but I'll start with my honorable mentions. We have the Minnesota Timberwolves. They're currently 39-38. They're 8th in the Western Conference. They've lost one, and they are 5-5 in their last 10. I also want to throw the Pelicans in there. They're not on the graphic. I know. They're 39-38 as well. They're currently the 7th seed in the West. They've won one, obviously coming off that win against Denver. They're 7-3 in their last 10, so they're playing some really good ball. Nonetheless, not enough to crack the top 10. Finally, the last honorable mention here, we have the New York Knicks at 44-33. They're 5th in the Eastern Conference. They've won 2 in a row. They're 5-5 in their last 10. I know Julius Randle is going to be out for a little bit, at least tonight's matchup. But nonetheless, the Knicks are playing some decent ball. Just got Brunson back. He's getting back to being his normal self. So let's get into the actual top 10. Let's crack in there. And we're going to start with the Phoenix Suns. And I know. The Phoenix Suns, they got KD back, Devin Booker, Chris Paul, DeAndre Ayton. They're fully healthy right now. But we got to see them play. We got to see them gather some W's here. You look at the Phoenix Suns right now. Yes, they have won 3 in a row, but they're 4-6 in their last 10. They're currently 41-35 in the Western in the entire league. They're 4th in the Western Conference. Excuse me there. So they got the 4 seed. They're 41-35, but they're 4-6 in their last 10. That's why they're coming in 10th place here, because I do have teams like the Golden State Warriors, the Los Angeles Clippers, who are below them in the standings, but I think they're playing a little bit better ball right now. Mind you, if I had to guess where the Suns would be next week, probably ahead of those teams. We just got to see how KD plays, how he fits in with that team, getting DeAndre Ayton back healthy, getting all the guys back in the mix. We got to see how that kind of plays out. But nonetheless, Suns come in to start the top 10 here. Next, we have the Warriors, who I just mentioned. The Warriors right now are 40-37. They're 6th in the Western Conference. They've won 1, but they're 6-4 in their last 10. They've been playing some better basketball. Now, we'll take a look at their remaining schedule the rest of the way. As I mentioned, the Western Conference is airtight. Hopefully, for the Golden State Warriors' sake, they have some home games lined up here, because they are just a completely different team when they're playing at home. But nonetheless, they come in at number 9. At number 8, we have the LA Clippers. Now, they are beat the hell up. You have Paul George, who's going to miss some time. You know, we just don't know yet, right? Paul George out indefinitely right now. Kawhi, as we know, is always on load management watch. But nonetheless, the Clippers right now, 41-36, 5th in the Western Conference. They've won 2 in a row. They're 7-3 in their last 10. If anybody knows, it would be me. The Clippers, they tend to play better even when their stars are out. They're such a deep team. They can keep this team afloat up until Paul George, if he does return postseason, whatever the case may be. They have a chance of keeping that team afloat there. But nonetheless, playing some really good ball. They're 7-3 in their last 10. They've won 2 in a row. Coming in at number 7, we have the Sacramento Kings at 46-30. They're currently 3rd in the Western Conference. They've won 1. They're 6-4 in their last 10. The Sacramento Kings moved down a little bit for me. They dropped some games that they really shouldn't have dropped, in my opinion. So that's the only reason that you're seeing them fall down below the Cleveland Cavaliers here. But nonetheless, I like what the Kings are doing. I think they're one of the best offensive units in the NBA. You have one of the best duos in De'Aaron Fox and Domantas Sabonis. And let's be honest, a lot of us, including myself, did not think the Kings would still be here in the top 3 of the Western Conference as we approach the final week or so in the NBA. Yet here they are, 3rd in the Western Conference with 46 wins, about to make their first playoff berth in quite a while. So shout out to the Kings there. At number 6, we have the Cleveland Cavaliers. The Cleveland Cavaliers are currently 48-29. They're 4th in the Eastern Conference. They are coming off a loss, but they're 7-3 in their last 10. So nonetheless, the Cleveland Cavaliers are playing much better. Or I shouldn't say much better. They're still playing really good basketball right now, despite the loss of late. That being said, they're one of the best defensive units in the NBA, and I think they're going to be a very fun team to keep an eye on in this postseason because, as I mentioned all season, I have defensive worries about that small backcourt with Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland playing at the same time. That being said, if you look on the opposite end, on the offensive end of the court for the Cavs, they're going to be very hard to stop, especially if Donovan Mitchell is really, really on his game like he usually is in the playoffs. So I expect the Cavs to take it up another level, as we'll see from quite a few of these teams. That's what it's going to be about once we get to the postseason. Coming in at number 5. This one may surprise a few. Obviously, I'm a big Sixers guy. I'm a Sixers fan. But I had to move them down the list a little bit here with the recent play. Now, mind you, they did just get a W against the Mavs once they returned home, but they did also drop 3 in a row on the road against Western Conference contenders, right? Now, that being said, you had Harden miss that entire road trip. You had Embiid miss the game against Denver on Monday. So take that 3-game loss on the road trip with a grain of salt, of course, but nonetheless, they did lose. You look at the Sixers right now, they're 50-26. They're third in the Eastern Conference. They've won one, as I said, coming off that win against the Mavs. They're 6-4 in their last 10. So dropped a few games, as I mentioned, those 3 on the road. Just got to look for them to finish out the season strong, right, to keep that 3rd seed because the Cleveland Cavaliers are not far behind them there. So, yes, we're going to need the Philadelphia 76ers to keep that strong play up until the end of the season. It's going to be interesting to see if they give James Harden rest down the stretch, give Joel Embiid rest down the stretch. Obviously, Embiid going for that MVP award for the first time in his career. He says he doesn't care about it. He cares about winning in the postseason. So we'll see how, beat up Embiid may be. Obviously, he's had that calf injury of late. We'll see how beat up he actually is as this season kind of closes out if they decide to give him some rest, which would ultimately risk that MVP award that he says he doesn't care about. So nonetheless, Sixers in a good spot. Keep the strong play up. They'll stay there. Number 4, we have the Memphis Grizzlies at 48-28. They're second in the Western Conference. They are coming off a loss, but they're 8-2 in their last 10. So they're playing some really, really good basketball. And they're making a strong push here to close the season. They got Ja back. Now, there's a lot of guys questionable, probable for tonight's matchup. It is a game that they're going to want to take care of business in tonight. So keep your eyes open for the Memphis Grizzlies. It's not impossible for them to catch the Denver Nuggets. It's very unlikely, depending on Nikola Jokic's situation, how many games he misses with his updated injury. But they're still in the race. They still have things to play for here. And they still do have the Sacramento Kings right on their heels at that 3rd seed. So if you want to avoid, let me see, who would they match up with right now? They're the 3rd seed. So Memphis is the 2nd seed. So they would match up play-in tournament considered here. New Orleans is the 7th seed. Minnesota the 8th seed. Lakers 9 seed. OKC the 10 seed. Versus Sacramento, you would get Golden State. So there's your difference between why it's important to be the 2nd seed versus the 3rd seed. You drop down to the 3rd seed, you're going to get your wish, I guess, if you're the Memphis Grizzlies, which would be the Golden State Warriors in the playoffs. Nonetheless, I don't want the defending champs in the first round. I don't know about you guys. Number 3, we have the Denver Nuggets, who I just mentioned. They are 51-25. They're first in the Western Conference. They're coming off a loss. They're 5-5 in their last 10, not playing the greatest basketball, but they have given themselves room to breathe. You're getting Nikola Jokic some rest right now, mind you. Did plummet him in the odds for the MVP award, according to FanDuel and DraftKings. Nonetheless, why would he care? He's a 2-time back-to-back MVP, right? He's got to be another guy that's just worried about getting to the playoffs healthy, rested, and ready to go for that postseason push. Nonetheless, I like where the Nuggets are at. They got some room to breathe, and we'll see what happens with Jokic. If he plays tonight, then maybe we don't have to worry about that at all. Number 2, we have the Boston Celtics. Number 2 and number 1 is where it gets interesting because you had the Boston Celtics just beat the Milwaukee Bucks in Milwaukee by 41. That being said, I still like the Bucks over the Celtics personally. I know it may have just been a statement game. It may have been the Celtics knocking on the door saying, hey, we are the number one team in the NBA. But when you have Giannis playing the way he played, Chris Middleton playing the way he played, Drew Holiday playing the way he played, and then you look on the other side, you had Jason Tatum going nuclear, 8 for 10 from the three-point line. Things like that are going to happen. I'm going to throw that game out. I still like what the Milwaukee Bucks are doing. They've stayed afloat all season. They've been able to get right back up to the top where they were last year in the Eastern Conference. And they're the team that I just trust a little bit more right now. Mind you, you have the Celtics at 53-24. They're second. They're coming off the win against the Bucks, obviously 7-3 in their last 10. You have the Bucks 55-22, first place. They're coming off the loss to the Celtics, 7-3 in their last 10 as well. I think you can pick your poison there, right? You can pick either one to put it number one. I'm gonna roll with the Bucks just because that's the team I trust more, with Giannis at the helm. But nonetheless, both of these teams are playing some great ball right now. Those are going to be your updated power rankings. I'll run through them one more time. Coming in at 10, we had the Phoenix Suns. Coming in at 9, we had the Golden State Warriors. Coming in at 8, we have the Los Angeles Clippers. Coming in at 7, we have the Sacramento Kings. Coming in at 6, we have the Cleveland Cavaliers. And coming in at 5, we have the Philadelphia 76ers. Number 4, Memphis Grizzlies. Number 3, Denver Nuggets. And then we have the Celtics and the Bucks to round out the top 2 there. So top 5s haven't changed much, just the order of them most of this season. It'll be fun getting into the tiered segment next week as we approach the playoffs. Who do I think are the real contenders in the Eastern Conference, in the Western Conference, but in the NBA as a whole? We'll get to take a look at that, the pretenders, and then some wild cards that we feel as we approach the postseason there. Moving into the playoff picture, right? And it's a perfect way to kind of move into this, right? We talked about the top 10 teams that I have in the NBA and the National Basketball Association right now. Let's talk about some of the playoff picture and what some of these teams are facing currently. So I know this may look like a lot on your screen. Don't worry, I'm going to run through it all here for you guys. And just some teams that I'm kind of keeping my eyes on as we approach the postseason, right? These teams at the bottom of each conference, we got to keep an eye on these guys because a lot of this basketball in the last week or so, especially in the Western Conference, turns into playoff basketball in reality. So just briefly looking at the top right now in the Eastern Conference, let's start there. We have the Chicago Bulls rounding out the top 10, the teams in the play-in tournament, I should say. Toronto at number 9, Atlanta at number 8. You have the Miami Heat at number 7. That would be your play-in tournament right now. So you would have the Miami Heat versus Chicago Bulls. You'd have the Atlanta Hawks versus Toronto Raptors, and then the winner of those games ultimately playing each other for those final seeds in the playoffs. Then you have Brooklyn at number 6. You have the New York Knicks at number 5. Cleveland Cavaliers at number 4. You have the Sixers at number 3. Learn how to count, Scotty. Yes, the Cavs at number 4, Sixers at number 3, Celtics at number 2, and you have the Milwaukee Bucks at number 1 in the Eastern Conference. And then over in the West, in the play-in tournament, you currently have the Oklahoma City Thunder, the LA Lakers, the Minnesota T-Wolves, and the New Orleans Pelicans. Obviously, that would be the Pelicans squaring off against OKC, Minnesota versus LA in that play-in tournament first round. Coming in at number 6, we have the Golden State Warriors. We have the LA Clippers at number 5, Phoenix Suns at number 4, Sacramento Kings at number 3, Memphis Grizzlies at number 2, Denver Nuggets at number 1. When I'm looking at this, things get interesting, right? You look at the Western Conference seeds. You could go really anywhere from seed 4 all the way down to the 13th team in the West, which would be the Portland Trailblazers. Now, mind you, there are a ton of guys missing from the Portland Trailblazers currently. So I don't think, I honestly don't think they're going to make a run to get into the postseason. Same thing with Utah Jazz. I don't think that they're going to be able to make a run to ultimately put themselves in position to make a play-in, make the postseason. I think they will be one of the teams that end up, odd man out in this situation. You look at Dallas. That's the really tricky one, right? They're trying to make the playoffs right now. They haven't played very good basketball, right? Since getting Kyrie, it just hasn't looked great. They're very small. They don't have much size to them. They're very, they're not very deep, right? They lost all their depth trading for Kyrie. Kyrie just hasn't been the piece that you thought it would be fitting in and playing beside Luka, right? They have to basically take turns with the basketball, which doesn't always work when you talk about chemistry for a basketball team. And then on top of all of those things, they have defensive issues, right? They just don't play very good defense. And they don't have the makeup of a good defensive team. So it makes sense. I guess we all just thought Luka could kind of will this team into a contender, and he's just not been able to do that this season. Mind you, the surrounding cast has changed. No Jalen Brunson this year. That's huge. Probably the biggest thing here. I mean, if we're being honest, Jalen Brunson, and I know Kyrie Irving is a great player, but sometimes when you have guys that are at the same level, right? Kyrie and Luka, it's hard to differentiate. It's hard to take turns. It's hard to know your role. And so with Jalen Brunson, you kind of had that identification where Luka's the guy, Jalen Brunson's the next tiered guy. And they didn't really have that battle at the top. It was very clear as far as hierarchy within that team. And I just don't think they have that right now with Kyrie and Luka. And then you just add that in with the defensive woes and the lack of size and depth. So Dallas, they look like an odd team out as well. Now, depends how you view OKC versus Dallas. Obviously, Shai, SGA, he needs to get healthy as we approach the play-in tournament. I do like what OKC has there, man. I'm not going to lie to you. You take OKC versus Dallas, for instance, Luka versus SGA, you may as well cancel them out the way SGA has been playing this season. So then from there, who has the better team? Obviously, Kyrie's the next best star when you talk about matchups, but after that, you could argue that the Oklahoma City Thunder have the better players than Josh Giddey. The Jalen Williams, both of them have been playing very well for the Thunder. Isaiah Joe, a guy that the 76ers, I regretfully have to say, let go of. He's given them great minutes. So they got some decent stuff going on there in OKC. You need to get SGA healthy. You look at the Lakers. You have LeBron back. You have AD in the mix. Excuse my dog Rocket if you hear him barking in the background. There must be a mailman at the door. Nonetheless, I had a package arrive. It's some Cactus Jack shorts. I'll have to show you guys those on the TikTok. They're super fire. But nonetheless, hush down, Rocket. I'm doing a show right now. You have the LA Lakers who just got LeBron back. They made all those additions at the trade deadline. I like the LA Lakers to at least make the play-in tournament. I'll be honest with you guys. The Minnesota Timberwolves just got Karl Anthony Towns back. You got Rudy Gobert in the mix again. You have Anthony Edwards. He was able to come back from his injury as well. He's a few games back. New Orleans Pelicans, Brandon Ingram, CJ McCollum, Trey Murphy Jr. And excuse me, I want to make sure I got his name correct. He is one of my favorite players right now in the league. Yeah, Trey Murphy the third. That's where I'm messing up. It wasn't his first name. He's not a junior. He's a third. Nonetheless, they've been playing some much better basketball. When are you going to get Zion back? Are you going to get him back this season? He didn't look like he was in great shape from the videos I saw him the other night shooting around, but nonetheless, he can get into shape pretty quick given his size and given his athletic ability. So they're an interesting case, right? The Golden State Warriors are the defending champs. I think they get in, right? The LA Clippers, they got a nice lead on what? The Dallas Mavericks. Dallas Mavericks are 4 games back of the LA Clippers. That's not an insurmountable lead as far as games back, but nonetheless, I think the Clippers are fairly safe depending on their schedule down the stretch. You look at the Phoenix Suns, I would say they're safe. They're getting healthy at the right time. They should be able to build some chemistry and win some games in this final week or so. But you look at that, it's just all jumbled up in the Western Conference. You have to ask yourself, first, who's actually going to freaking make it? Because you just have a bunch of teams down there at the bottom that are completely in the mix, if we're being honest. But then you have to ask yourself, who are the real contenders in the West. And depending on health, honestly, depending on health, matchup, that's going to play a huge role. Those things are going to play huge roles in who is an actual contender in the Western Conference. Because if you get, say, the Denver Nuggets and let's just say the play-in tournament, Golden State drops a game in these last couple games, and Golden State's in the play-in tournament. Now they come in as the 7th seed. You play the Nuggets first round. Nuggets' chances of getting to the Western Conference Finals or the NBA Finals drop significantly. Doesn't mean they're going to lose that series in the playoffs, but they have a much, much better chance of doing so if you're playing the defending champs in the first round. I mean, that's as simple as it gets, right? Looking at just the Golden State Warriors through the Dallas Mavericks, their remaining schedules, you have the Golden State Warriors. They play San Antonio, Denver, OKC, Sacramento, Portland. So Golden State will get a chance to ultimately knock off OKC. They have some other playoff teams in the mix there, as well as Sacramento and Denver. You look at New Orleans. Excuse me. Got some dry mouth. Let me get some water. Whenever I get going, the mouth just gets dry, man. Start talking too fast. Nonetheless, we have the New Orleans Pelicans with a remaining schedule of the LA Clippers, Sacramento Kings, Memphis Grizzlies, New York Knicks, and Minnesota Timberwolves. So the road will not be easy for the New Orleans Pelicans, easily said here. The Minnesota Timberwolves, they have the LA Lakers, Portland Trailblazers, Brooklyn Nets, San Antonio Spurs, and the New Orleans Pelicans left. LA Lakers obviously have Minnesota, Houston, Utah, the LA Clippers, Phoenix Suns, and Utah again to finish out their season. Oklahoma City, they start at Indianapolis, the Indiana Pacers. They got the Phoenix Suns, the Golden State Warriors, Utah Jazz, and the Memphis Grizzlies. So their road is not very easy. And then Dallas Mavericks, they are at Miami, at Atlanta, come home to play Sacramento, play Chicago at home, and then finish out their season against the Spurs. So you look at these schedules, I would say Golden State, Dallas probably have the easiest schedules, followed by the Lakers, Minnesota, Houston, Utah, Clippers, Phoenix, Utah. So, I mean, Phoenix, Clippers, that's going to be tough. Minnesota will be tough tonight, of course. That's a good matchup. But nonetheless, I would say they're probably third as far as easiest schedule after Dallas and Golden State. But OKC, Minnesota, and New Orleans. Let me take Minnesota out of there. I'd put them in the group with the LA Lakers. New Orleans and OKC have by far the toughest schedules remaining for those teams. I don't want to call them on the bubble because you're talking 7 through 12 basically, or 6 through 12. But nonetheless, these are all teams that are technically on the bubble, considering the separation between each of them. So I would personally go, just a prediction before this next week transpires, I'm going to go Golden State, Minnesota, LA, and I'm going to go New Orleans despite the tough schedule, just because I don't like the Dallas Mavericks to get in. I just don't think if this next week turns into playoff basketball, the Dallas Mavericks will lose those games. Now, mind you, they do have one of the easier schedules remaining. They would have to win out to get back in this picture. So I just don't know about the Dallas Mavericks. Of course, they could make the play-in tournament and go from there, but I just don't like their chances. I'll go with Golden State, New Orleans, Minnesota, and the LA Lakers as my teams to get into the playoffs. Excuse me. OKC would be the other team there as well. Yeah, my bad. So there's 6 teams there. So, yeah, you would have to get 5 of them in. I would say OKC is that other team that gets in there despite the tough schedule. Dallas, that being said, what? 1 game back of the Oklahoma City Thunder? They could make it happen. Maybe I'm selling the Dallas Mavericks a little short. I just don't trust them at all, given their woes. They have all the calculations that make them into a team you don't trust in the playoffs and a team you don't trust down the stretch for me. Looking over in the Eastern Conference, we have just a few battles going on there. So we can start up top. You have the Philadelphia 76ers. They're only 2.5 games ahead of the Cleveland Cavaliers. the reason I find this interesting, the reason I find this somewhat, a reason to speculate on this, I guess you could say, is ultimately the Sixers' remaining schedule, right? So the Sixers finish out the season against the Toronto Raptors tonight, the Milwaukee Bucks on Sunday, Boston, Miami, the Atlanta Hawks, and the Brooklyn Nets to finish out the season here, right? Tough. They've had the toughest schedule after All-Star break, of course. The Cleveland Cavaliers remaining schedule, they have 5 games left. They have the New York Knicks at home. They have the Indiana Pacers at home. They travel to play the Orlando Magic twice. And then they finish their season out against Charlotte. So, mind you, I don't think the Sixers lose out, anything like that. Cleveland's 2.5 games back, so the Sixers would have to probably drop 3 or 4. I don't see that happening, but nonetheless, it's something to keep your eye on with the strength of schedule for the Philadelphia 76ers. Something to keep in mind there as well, Philly does have the tiebreaker, winning the season series 2-1. The other team there's 2 more teams I want to look at here. So the Washington Wizards are interesting. They're 2 games back of the Chicago Bulls. You look at the Washington Wizards' remaining schedule. They have Orlando. They're in New York to play the Knicks. They take on Milwaukee at home. They're in Atlanta to take on the Hawks. They have the Miami Heat at home, and then they finish their season out at home against the Houston Rockets. You look at Chicago. They take on the Memphis Grizzlies, Atlanta Hawks. They're in Charlotte, in Milwaukee, in Dallas, and then finish out their season against the Detroit Pistons at home. So I wouldn't say one or the other has too much of a more difficult schedule. Both are playing Milwaukee. Both have multiple playoff teams in their road to get to the playoffs. But nonetheless, can Washington overtake the Chicago Bulls for that final play-in seed at number 10? That's something to keep an eye on there as well. And then finally, I just want to look at Miami, just because you look at the difference between the 7 seed and the 6 seed. The obvious difference is you don't have to play in the play-in tournament, which I think is a big deal. It's kind of a reason to get to at least that 6 seed in the Eastern Conference here. So you have the Brooklyn Nets currently 1.5 games up on the Miami Heat for that 6 seed. You have Miami finishing the season out at home versus Dallas, in Detroit, in Philly, in Washington, and then finally back home against the Orlando Magic to close the season. Meanwhile, the Brooklyn Nets have the Atlanta Hawks at home, Utah Jazz at home, Minnesota Timberwolves at home. They travel to Detroit to take on the Pistons. And then they finish their season out at home against the Orlando Magic and the Philadelphia 76ers. So if you ask me, I think the Brooklyn Nets have the easier path, albeit only 1 road game in their last 6. I still think the Miami Heat are ultimately the better team. It's just, can they finish strong here, right? Brooklyn Nets have been able to keep themselves afloat just enough to stay ahead of the Miami Heat there. That's going to be the peek at the playoff picture. I know it's a lot of information. You can look here on the screen. You see it's a lot of information. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of different implications regarding schedule, regarding how teams finish. But we get to break that all down a week from now as we approach the real postseason picture. We should have a better idea, a better picture of what's going on. Maybe at least in the Eastern Conference. I don't know if the Western Conference will be figured out by next Friday. But nonetheless, we'll come back on that Sunday after for the final playoff picture preview. Nonetheless, this is just taking a peek. Just wanted to give you guys a quick update as we approach the last week or so of regular season NBA basketball. And nonetheless, some of these teams will be fighting for their lives down the stretch. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. Let's get to Friday night picks. So we got 2 more segments here. The normal segments, right? Normal segments, weekly segments for people that don't usually watch. Updated power rankings, Friday night picks, Thursday night recaps, and Friday night best bets. That's what we get into every single Scotty Talks NBA show. Now, I will say my buddy Dylan, my co-host, my co-founder of DSM Media, Dylan Davis, we have some content in the works. So things may change schedule-wise, show-wise, with my show here and Scotty Talks NBA, because we have a special project that we're putting together that we're going to start here soon on DSM Media. So just a little sneak peek again at the future for DSM Media. Keep your eyes peeled. We will be making some announcements of our plans and what we're going to do here to kind of revamp the content. But nonetheless, let's get into Friday night picks. We're going to go around the horn here. So we got the Chicago Bulls at the Charlotte Hornets. Ultimately, the Bulls are a 10-point favorite in this one. Bulls need this game a lot more than what the Charlotte Hornets do. Ultimately, the Bulls are fighting for a playoff spot. The Charlotte Hornets season is pretty much done. The Charlotte Hornets are also pretty beat up. Terry Rozier will not suit up for this game. Gordon Hayward was doubtful. They're missing a plethora of other guys as well. I believe Kelly Oubre was questionable for this game. Chicago Bulls, for the most part, Drummond, Caruso, they're questionable for this game. Chicago Bulls, for the most part, are healthy. They're trying to make the playoffs this year, so they need to get this W. I'm going to go with the Bulls in this one. Next, we have the Oklahoma City Thunder visiting the Pacers. No SGA in this one. No, most likely no Halliburton in this one. No Chris Duarte. For the Pacers, OKC 4-point favorites nonetheless on the road. They've had guys that are able to step up. Jalen Williams, Isaiah Joe stepped up the other night. So they got guys that are able and willing to step up for them down there in OKC. I think OKC playing for something here. Mind you, the Indiana Pacers aren't completely out of it, but if Tyrese Halliburton isn't going to be healthy, if you're not going to have a healthy squad, might be best to just go ahead and end this season early. So no Halliburton tonight. I'm going to go with the Oklahoma City Thunder, who's still playing, still in the middle of that fight in the Western Conference for the play-in tournament at least. I'm going to go ahead and go with the Oklahoma City Thunder here. We got Toronto at Philly. I'm going to go with the Sixers here. No injury designations for the Sixers. They're fully healthy. Embiid, Harden, ready to go tonight. For the Raptors, they should have just about everybody in this one. Siakam, Fred VanVleet, Scotty Barnes, all should be able to go. So both teams should be fully healthy. This should be a little bit of a playoff preview, a playoff caliber type game on a Friday night here in Philly. You have the Sixers as 5-point favorites. I'm going with the Sixers in this one at home. They need to keep stacking wins, and as long as their guys are healthy, they're going to do so. Next, we have the Orlando Magic visiting the Washington Wizards. Ultimately, I'm going to go with the Magic in this one. They've just been playing much better basketball. I love Paolo Banchero, of course, as a Duke guy. But nonetheless, I don't really like where the Washington Wizards are at right now. No Bradley Beal, no Kyle Kuzma. Now, mind you, they have played better this season without Bradley Beal. That can be statistically proven. From my perspective, I don't think they're a better team without Bradley Beal, and they're definitely not without Kyle Kuzma. I'm going to go with the Orlando Magic on the road tonight, despite the Wizards fighting for a playoff spot there. So keep your eyes peeled for that. Magic also have an outside chance of getting into the play-in tournament, something to keep your eyes on over the last week or so, I should say, last couple games. Next, we have the Jazz visiting the Celtics. Celtics are 9.5-point favorites in this one. No Lauri Markkanen for Utah. No Jordan Clarkson. There's actually quite a few guys that are out for Utah tonight. Nonetheless, Boston is ready to go. They're gearing up for the playoffs. I got Boston taking this one at home. Next, we have the Atlanta Hawks at the Brooklyn Nets. You have the Atlanta Hawks in this one, fairly healthy. You have the Brooklyn Nets, fairly healthy. I'm going to go with the Atlanta Hawks. They're playing for more right now. They need a win to stay afloat in that play-in tournament. Not to say the Nets don't need wins. I just look at the Hawks, honestly, if I'm being completely honest, I haven't said it yet. I think the Hawks are a better team than Brooklyn Nets without KD, without Kyrie, even with all these nice players that they got in return. Mikal Bridges has been great. I still like star power, and I still like Trae Young and DeJounte Murray in that Atlanta Hawks unit over the Brooklyn Nets, and I definitely like them to win tonight. Heading over to the other column here, we have the Knicks at the Cavaliers. Cavs are 3.5-point favorites. I believe Jared Allen is questionable for this one. Julius Randle is out for this one. Gonna go with the Cavs at home, although I'm feeling a little sketchy about it, just because the Knicks do have Jalen Brunson and they do have a capability to win this game, especially with no Jared Allen on Cleveland's side. But I'm gonna go with D. Mitch. I'm gonna go with Darius Garland. I'm gonna ride those guys tonight and go with the Cavs. Next, we have the Detroit Pistons visiting the Houston Rockets. You have the Rockets as a 6.5-point favorite at home. Detroit Pistons are all beat up. Their leading scorer, Bogdanovich, he hasn't played in quite a while. Jaden Ivey, he's been lighting it up for them. But nonetheless, I'm going to go with the Rockets tonight. I just like what they got going on down there. Their young talent with Jabari Smith, Jalen Green, Kevin Porter Jr. So I like what Houston has going on a lot more than what I like what Detroit has going on currently. Next, we have a game with major playoff implications in the Western Conference, right? The last four here actually have major playoff implications. So you look at the Clippers, the last five games listed here. So you have the Clippers visiting the Grizzlies. Obviously, no Paul George. Kawhi's questionable for this one. Grizzlies are 5-point favorites. Ton of questionable guys for the Grizzlies tonight. Probable guys. Jaren Jackson Jr., probable. Desmond Bane, probable. Ja Morant, probable. Barring those guys missing the game, I'm going to go with the Grizzlies at home in this one. I think they're going to try they're going to try as hard as they can to steal that number 1 seed in the Western Conference from the Denver Nuggets. I don't know that they'll be able to do it, but why not go for it? I think they can take care of business against a depleted Clippers team at home tonight. Next, we have the Lakers visiting the T-Wolves. This has been a hell of a matchup all season. Nonetheless, I do like the T-Wolves in Minnesota. This one's going to be a tight one. It was hard for me to pick between this one because I do like the Lakers. I like what they've done. I love that LeBron is back, the additions they made at the trade deadline. But there's just something about the Minnesota T-Wolves at home with Cat back. And Edwards can kind of feed off of Cat being there, taking some of the attention away. I just like the T-Wolves and how they match up with the LA Lakers. You can have Cat go against AD, but Cat doesn't really have to guard AD. You can throw Rudy Gobert on AD. So they got a lot of different ways that they can match up with the LA Lakers. Nonetheless, it should be a tight one. Major playoff implications. I'm going to go with the T-Wolves in that one. Next, we have the Spurs visiting the Warriors. Let's be honest, Spurs aren't trying to win any games. We're going to go with the Warriors in this one, who are fighting for a playoff spot. We have the Kings visiting the Trailblazers. Kings 14-point favorites on the road in this one. Blazers have a ton of guys out. They're not trying to win any games. Damon's done for the year. Simons is not playing. So I'm going to go with the Kings, who are still fighting for playoff seeding in the West. And then finally, to end the night, you have a juggernaut matchup, right? Denver Nuggets versus the Phoenix Suns in Phoenix. Now, you see the 10-point spread. That's because Jokic is questionable for this game. Jokic doesn't play. I don't think it'll be close. I think the Suns take care of business with KD and Ayton and being fully healthy there. Ultimately, I am going to go with the Suns at home. They need the game more simply. Now, keep in mind, Denver Nuggets are playing for that 1 seed. So if Jokic can go, they do have motivation to play. They do have a reason for him to play. It's just about how beat up, how unrested is Nikola Jokic. But I'll go with the Suns in this one to cap off the night. So once again, just go through them very quickly here. I got the Bulls. I have the Thunder. I have the Sixers. I have the Magic. I have the Celtics. I have the Hawks. I have the Cavs. I have the Rockets. I have the Grizzlies. I have the T-Wolves. I have the Warriors. I have the Kings. And I have the Suns to round out the Friday night slate. So next, let's get to the best segment of the day, my favorite segment of the day, best bets for the Friday night slate. You see them right there on your screen. So we're going to start at the top. Tyrese Maxey over 2.5 threes at -105. I was beating myself up this morning, guys, because when I checked the lines this morning, he was at +100 for 2.5 threes. Now, mind you, Maxey, if I ever see him in plus money for 3 threes in one game, I'm smashing it, especially when Harden is playing. He just plays much better. He gets a lot more open opportunities with Harden facilitating, him being able to play off the ball. I love him to get 3 threes in any game. But this matchup specifically, I love it because he has hit this mark in both games he's played against the Toronto Raptors this season, including a game where he scored a career high 44 points and went 9 for 12 from the 3-point line. So just went nuclear, of course. In the other matchup where the Sixers actually lost this game, so even in a loss, Tyrese Maxey was able to come up with 4 threes in that game. He went 4 for 8 from the 3-point line. So I like Tyrese Maxey over 2.5 threes any game. I definitely like it against the Toronto Raptors at home on a Friday night. Next, we have Jaden Ivey over 19.5 points at -155. Obviously, this one is lacking a little bit of juice, but it's a safer play, and I'm willing to put it out there. I like Jaden Ivey in this one against the Houston Rockets. It's a young backcourt that he can get his numbers against. But on top of that, you have him scoring 20 in his last 3 games. You have him averaging 28 points in his last 2. You have a bunch of guys, a bunch of scorers out for the Detroit Pistons. The points have to come from somewhere. They want to see what they got in their young first-round pick from last draft. I like Jaden Ivey to get a plethora of opportunities to score tonight, and I like Jaden Ivey over 19.5 points at -155. And then finally, we have Ant Edwards over 24.5 points at -125. He actually had a great game in his last outing. Let me get it pulled up here just to give you some reference. Meant to write that down. Apologize. Let's see here. Anthony Edwards. What? Yeah, I was about to say, why is it not coming up? So game log, I believe he had 31 in his last game. Before that, wasn't hitting the number in the previous 3. Now, mind you, the first of that 3 was the game where he was injured, and then 2 games kind of recovering from that injury. I look for him to be back into his regular shape, be back in his regular form tonight, and ultimately get his season average of around 24 to 25 points. I like him to clear this against the Lakers. This is a big game. This is basically a playoff game tonight. So I think you get the best version of Anthony Edwards. I think adding Karl Anthony Towns, as I mentioned earlier, into the mix gives leeway for Anthony Edwards to cook even more, takes attention off of Anthony Edwards. So I like his odds tonight to get 25 points. So we got Maxey over 2.5 threes at -105, Jaden Ivey over 19.5 points at -155, and then Anthony Edwards over 24.5 points at -125. Those are going to be your best bets of the Friday night slate, courtesy of myself. Let's get back to our regular view here. Perfect. Awesome. So that was a great show, guys. I hope you enjoyed. Obviously, this is pre-recorded if you haven't found out by now, but I will be back live next week to cap off the week and kind of cap off the NBA regular season. It officially ends next Sunday, which, as I mentioned, we'll get the playoff prediction show after that. But nonetheless, we'll be wrapping everything up for the regular season next Friday on the show. So I'll have plenty of content to get through for you guys, plenty of best bets, plenty of game picks for the Friday night slate once again. But guys, it has been fun. I hope you have a great rest of your Friday. I hope you enjoyed the show. Be sure to check out DSM Media right after this for Sixers pregame live with myself and Dylan Davis. We'll be breaking down the matchup in depth against the Toronto Raptors tonight in Philly. Be sure to check me out at Scotty Drown on all social media platforms. You can find me. And, of course, be sure to hit that subscribe button for DSM Media. You can find DSM Media on Twitter at DSM_media. From there, click on the link tree, give you our Instagram, our YouTube, our merch site, our TikTok. We got you covered on all social media platforms. Be sure to follow us on all. Guys, that's going to be it for this episode of Scotty Talks NBA. It's always a pleasure. Have a great Friday. Peace.